Welcome to this version of In the Treehouse. I have a good friend of mine, Steve Napier, with us today, and we're going to dig into a lot of stuff. Steve is the executive director of Habitat for Humanity here in North Georgia, and so we're going to be talking about that and some other things. Before we do that, I do want to call out my sponsors. One, my company, Action Coach. Action Coach is that business that helps so many businesses and nonprofits like Steve to become more efficient, to do more with the folks that are there without killing them, to make more money, enjoy more of their life. I enjoy doing it with lots of business owners. If you are somebody who's in business and it's just not giving you what you thought it would be, give me a call and we'll have a conversation about how we can make your business that truly desired business you want. And then Fist Bump, who is the producer of the show, huge team behind the scenes who makes this happen every week for us. The Fist Bump is that company that elevates your presence online through wide variety of mediums, LinkedIn and other social medias, where you become the expert. You become the one that people are like, oh yeah, I know you. You are such and such, and they want to talk to you. And of course, that then generates revenue. So if you are looking to up your presence through and marketing through social media, definitely get in touch with Fist Bump. So we have the housekeeping stuff aside.
All right.
Steve, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, man. Thanks
so much. A lot of fun. Steve and I have been working together for 3-4 months now, and it's been great. But every guest, I start with when you were a kid, 8, 10, 12 years old. Everybody had someplace where they escaped the world. They had a treehouse, which is kind of the impetus, and the treehouse up over our shoulders here. What was your treehouse? What did you dream about when you grew up? What did you want to be?
What I wanted to be, I don't know if I started at 8 or whatever, but it's funny that I found that my mom had this book, and I don't know if you had one of these or your parents, but it like every year, and I think it started maybe in kindergarten, it had like a flap and you put things in there the kids had done, and you put the report card in there, and so I saw that, Steve likes to build, or he likes trucks. So that fits into kind of the habitat. But it's not something that I really pursued, but it's weird how things kind of tie together over time. And it's funny because I had a friend, and he and I used to play Tonka trucks when we were like 5 years old. And he was on the opposite fence of me. Like our backyards butted up together, and we would throw the Tonka trucks, which weren't the cheap kind like they are now, out of plastic. They were the
metal ones,
And then we would play. And occasionally he'd come over to my house or I'd go over to his, but we just played between the fence. So we later were in high school together, and we laughed about that. It's like we were in prison playing between the fence, and we're throwing these Tonka trucks. But and then that later kind of that, I don't know if it was a dream. In college, I knew I wanted to do business. That's why I majored in, but I was like, I'd like to be commissioner of baseball. That would be such a great job. And I actually worked for a minor league ballpark team affiliated with the New York Mets when I was growing up and going to college in Jackson, Mississippi. Cool. It was weird because they wound up having some people that became famous in baseball. The most famous being Billy Beane, who the movie Moneyball is made after, was on that minor league team. So I knew him when he was like 20 years old. And I don't know.
And
you probably have watched that.
I've heard the name, and I mean, it's been years since I watched the movie. But
But Brad Pitt plays Billy Beane. So I like to say that I have worked along somebody that Brad Pitt played in a movie. So, anyway.
Well, and I heard Brad Pitt is, they're looking at Brad Pitt to be you in the movie.
I think it would be Danny DeVito, really.
Oh, no. No. The Tonka trucks, I hadn't thought about that in years. I had some. The only one that I remember I had was the dump truck.
Yeah.
Right? The big dump truck that it was about this big.
Right.
And
you had the cream of the
well,
the top of line.
That was it. But I had like a lot of tractors because I grew up in Kansas. And so, everybody gave us tractors, and I had like plows, the old John Deere types of things. And so I'd plow and all that kind of stuff in the backyard, make a mess that I'm sure my dad didn't really like, but it wasn't that big, but cool. Yeah. So you majored in business.
I did.
And I just learned or remembered this past week about what you did. I mean, after the Major League Ball, you did some pretty big stuff. It sounds like you worked for some big organizations. Well,
I worked for the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency a couple years out of college. Mm-hmm. Worked for a bank a good portion of college. Worked for a law firm running errands. Worked for this minor league ball club affiliated with the Mets. But when kind of the real job I had a year or two out of college was working with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which examines national banks. And I was based out of St. Louis, and my wife at the time was in law school, and so that's where I kind of started. And then moved to the Federal Reserve when we moved to Atlanta.
Okay.
Worked there for about 11 years.
When was that?
We moved in 91.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the guys, one of my professors in college was one of the governors of the Fed right about that time.
Okay.
Wayne Angel. I don't know if you ever came across him, but he was one of the Federal Reserve governors.
I've got a certificate that says I'm a certified bank examiner by Alan Greenspan.
There you go.
Who I think is close to 100 now.
And still alive.
I know.
Yeah. Wow. So, that whole big money picture, it just always baffles me.
Yeah.
As you were doing that and in the Fed, and there's so much, as far as I think people don't understand money.
Right.
That is a different perspective when you're working in the Fed, and that's all you're doing is monetary and currency and all that.
Yeah.
So,
our job was really examining banks.
Uh-huh.
And I've got some wild stories from that.
Yeah.
We talk about business, and I've been working with you about business practices. Yeah. When you go in and you examine a bank, you're also examining the bank's decision to have lent money to other people. So you kind of understand other businesses as well.
Yeah.
So I saw some crazy things.
Yeah.
When I first started out, I don't know if you remember the Yugo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was like a car that you'd rent for a weekend and trash it, basically. I mean, it was so inexpensive.
It would only last a weekend.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, so we went down to a bank in Ocala, Florida to examine them. And the bank was set way off the road with these wonderful oak trees out front, and there were a bunch of Yugos out front. Well, they had repossessed these Yugos.
Yeah.
They were like $3,000 or something, 3,500 at the time.
Yeah.
And they had become the largest financing agent for Yugos in the country. And what was happening is the local guy that was selling these, somebody would walk in on a weekend, they wouldn't run a credit report on them, and then they would take the documents over to the bank and said, well, we did 5 deals this week, and the bank would book them. And about 6 months later or 3 months later, 3 months later, it was becoming a big problem.
Yeah.
Couldn't find the people, and they were having so the bank had a whole host of Yugos. So
and a car dealer that was out of business, I'm sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It was.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so what would be something you learned? I mean, that's a great story, but as you saw how people used money at the time. What's something that people don't get about money, do you think?
Well, I don't know if at the time I was young and not foolish, but I think how hard it is to come by, just from a personal standpoint, and and running a nonprofit, how hard it is to come by. I saw some foolish practices of lending money to people that had no money, had no sense of lending to. And I saw a banker one time pull out a stack of credit cards that he had personally, like this big. And I said, well, what does that say about that guy running a business? Is he's living on debt too much or whatever. So you found some interesting characters along the way, because we'd go into small communities. We actually talked about, you lived in Kansas. When I lived in St. Louis working for the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, it was kind of like my big deal. I could got to the point that I could lead a bank exam, and I was, and take a crew with me and manage that crew in the process. And we went out to Kansas one time, and there was an old guy there. I forgot, Kensington, Kansas. Is that a place it would be on the western side?
Yeah, there's a lot of small little towns out there.
And they had no paved road. And we went in there, and the guy showed me the bank vault. And the bank had been there forever. It's probably one of the ones that had been robbed.
Probably.
During the
Jesse James.
Right. And he showed me like these stickers in the bank vault from the 20s and 30s where somebody had come out there to evaluate the safety of the vault.
So it was safe. It was secure.
Yeah, right.
That's wild. Yeah, and hadn't been updated since.
Yeah, probably. Oh no. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's so incredible experience in working in the Fed and in commerce. But then something that led you to make a change.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing banking anymore.
No. And ministry surprisingly calls a lot of bankers and a lot of attorneys for some reason. That'd be maybe another discussion for a full podcast. We got settled in a church in Atlanta, Glenn Memorial, which is on the campus at Emory University. And I met some phenomenal women, and it was part of a Bible study. And, one was a woman by the name of Eleanor Richardson, who was one of the first women state legislators in Georgia. And she was very socially minded, socially liberal, but she was fiscally conservative. It's like, oh, we got to make sure we got the dollars to do this and everything. And her and some other people, we were in a year-long Bible study, and just there was a part of me that then I said, well, I can go to seminary. It's just really in my backyard, because it really was. I knew some professors. I was able to get some money to go through a generous endowment they had. And I was like, well, this isn't going to be too hard. And besides, Emory was charging so much to park, and I had a sticker on my car from the church, so I could just park at the church and walk to the thing. It was literally in my backyard. So, and again, I knew some people, and I said, I know God wants me in seminary, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I very quickly determined it wasn't going to be pastoring a church. And you've done that. Yeah. So, what can I? Yeah. And I think I would have been there, done that in about a week's time. Enjoy preaching when I've had the opportunity to do it, but I stew over every word. And it's like, because I want it to be good. Anyway, met a man who was teaching a class. We had a class called contextual education. Everything apparently is contextual in the setting you're in. And we were paired with nonprofits. And as part of that, and so, well, this is an avenue, to pursue. and I did that, and did some work at the Atlanta Community Food Bank on just a short-term basis. Then had a career at an organization affiliated with the North Georgia Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
That name was Action Ministries, and they eventually merged with Hope Atlanta. But I spent about 17 years.
Action Ministries, no affiliation with Action Coach.
No, that's your side gig, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You preach on Sundays. Yeah, nothing related to Action Coach.
Yeah.
But the word action is pretty important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to be doing action.
Yeah.
But,
so
so your heart was really going toward nonprofit.
Yes, it's funny because I also looked through some stuff my mom had and looked back. I was very active in the church growing up.
Yeah.
In fact, my best friends, even still, are ones that I grew up with as teenagers. And so I found some stuff my mom had, and then I got involved in a feeding ministry when I was 15 or 16. I'd forgotten all about that, and worked with other churches on issues like that. But really enjoy connecting the church to the world. I'm an ordained deacon in the Methodist Church, and that's part of the calling as well. It's like, ministry extends beyond the four walls of the church.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, and completely agree. I mean, we could get into a huge theological discussion here, which I'm keeping myself from doing, because
right.
When we talk about ecumenicism and the whole ecclesia, being the church is called out.
Right.
And
for sure.
And the purpose of the church is not to be in the four walls. The purpose of the church is to be, both in the four walls, but also in the world. You can't avoid one from the other.
Yeah.
So, when did you graduate from seminary? What year was that?
2000.
This is supposed to be the easy.
2002, I believe, in December. It's weird because, like in college, I actually finished in 85, but I finished mid-year, so I'm in the 86 class.
Yeah.
So I'll have to think about that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like I finished seminary mid-year, and so I'm in the later class.
Yeah. So that wasn't long after I actually left ministry. I left ministry in 98.
Well, God called you out of it and called me in. So.
Yeah. A better man came into ministry.
No, I don't know about that. When you taught me, and I've talked to my team about, are we growing, or are we maintaining? And maybe God was just maintaining. Called you onto something else.
God, I know for sure. And I unabashedly, for me, about 2-3 years ago, I was working with a coach who's actually out of New Zealand, Bruce Wilson, and he said to me, God knew exactly what he was doing when he brought you out of that church.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest gift that God could give you. Yeah. And it shifted my mindset from, why did this bad thing to understanding that God could bring us to a different place.
Well, you learned some skill sets there that's obviously transferred to what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that Bruce said was, if you had stayed in the church, your congregation would be, he was like, you probably would be a mega church leader, right? Because that was the direction it was going, and you'd have 5,000, 10,000 people in your church, and that would be the limit of your influence, right? Whereas what you're doing now, you have the entire world, and so it's like God prepared you back then for what you're doing now, and even thinking of that, these transitions that you went through. Right, going from banking and the Fed into seminary.
Yeah,
you mentioned there was a wife at the time.
Right.
Life has not always been a bed of roses. What are some of those things that have been challenges and learnings that you've taken from that?
It's funny. I met with some older people the other day who are regular volunteers
Uh-huh.
with them, and I mentioned going back to my Fed times is that one of my friends there said, the Fed house has all these ideas, and he said he coined a slogan, "Innovate without change," because everybody talks in a corporate level about change, but when it comes down to it, none of us want to change.
Yeah.
And I think what you have to realize, Michael, is that change is inevitable.
Yeah.
Life is not a straight line.
No.
It's zigs and zags. And I think when you're young, you kind of think about, oh, it's a straight line, and there's zigs and zags. And that really makes us stronger people, I think, kind of the struggles, and things of that sort. And then it's like taking some of the skills that I learned, early on and trying to apply those to ministry, just like you've done, taking the ministry and applied it to, we're going in opposite directions in some sense, but
we're not.
But you know what I mean? It's like, you take those skills and try to, and that's who you are, really. That makes up your DNA.
Yeah. And I think the idea that we see the summit of the mountain that we want to reach. Right. And we think that it can be a straight line. And nobody can climb a mountain straight up. Right? It just doesn't happen because you have to go back and forth. And the idea that, there are so many things that you have to learn before you get to the summit. Right. Because if we just went straight to the summit, we would not be prepared.
And I don't think we would enjoy it.
And we wouldn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So when you graduated from seminary in 2002, you didn't jump right into Habitat.
No, and I didn't jump into Action Ministries. It's funny, you have all this experience, and at least I found, well, you got experience in nonprofits. Can you do fundraising? Can you do? No, So I did a little bit of that. Just worked with a Atlanta Community Food Bank and got to know them. They were in the process. They've actually moved. They were in the process of moving out of Ted Turner's father's sign business, a location the food bank had gotten to another location. They've since moved from that location to another. So I saw kind of early on that transition they made, but
So you had to learn how to do fundraising.
To do fundraising, to do operations. I spent a lot of time at Action in various roles. And, I reinvented myself over time. Like administratively, I did HR for a while. I did fundraising at I wrote grants. I managed a grant portfolio that involved large federal grants that we had to do. I oversaw operations for transitional houses that we had put people in there that didn't need to be in there, and we owned the property, and they messed the property up. So I had a crew that had to go and
and I can imagine having to evict folks. And knowing that they're transitional anyway, so they're going to be homeless, right? And just back up. That must be hard.
Yeah, I remember interviewing when I was with that job at Action Ministries. When I was starting, I said, "Well, using it," which not what it was years ago. It's like you found drugs there, and the part of me, the soft-hearted part, said, "Well, I'd probably give them another chance." And the lady said, "No, you get them out of there." And I have learned over time, no, you get them out of there. And you got a ministry, you got a program to run, you got a business to run. And while you sympathize with them, you have policies and procedures, and you have guidelines, and you just can't.
And if you compromise on those, what's the consequence?
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
So I learned over time and learned quickly.
Yeah.
No, it's time to go.
I think
and hold people accountable.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think maybe people think nonprofits and ministries are you know, just handouts or,
Yeah.
enabling people. Right.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is that's a false perception.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
they're out there that do that,
Yeah.
but they're not.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So which brings us to Habitat, which
Sure.
is an absolutely phenomenal organization. I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't know what Habitat is. Although,
well, let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
Let me stop you right there.
Go for it, because you know where I'm going. People think they know what Habitat is.
They think they know,
Yeah.
and here's what they think they know. They think they know that Jimmy Carter started it, which is not the case, because Jimmy Carter came on the scene after his presidency, and Habitat was already
up and running,
and it was in his backyard.
Yeah.
The other thing is they think we give away houses.
Yes.
And we have people who are homeowners paying a 0% mortgage, which we make affordable, obviously. But we don't give away homes. Now we have taken people and worked, and I know you did some work with Family Promise before.
Right.
We've taken some people from other ministries, other nonprofits. In this industry of nonprofit social work, they talk about the continuum of care and how it's, some agencies are skilled at doing whatever.
Right.
And Habitat's kind of the carrot out there. You work this program and succeed, and then you can go here and you can go here, and here's Habitat out there. So we've taken people who were homeless, but they're hardworking people now. They're making an income, and they want what's best for themselves and for their family.
Right.
So we don't give away houses.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, and I'm glad you clarified that, because a lot of people have that misconception.
Yeah,
and it is there, and there are people out there. Well, aside from you see the ads all the time, tunnels for or Tower for Tunnels or whatever, where Frank Silva's giving away houses to that's one thing, paying off mortgages, and good for him.
Yeah.
But for them, there aren't people who just give away houses permanently with the title and deed and all that.
So, we have a lot of people apply. And if you're fortunate enough to get a letter that says, hey, we want to partner with you, and you become a homeowner, those people put in 200 sweat equity hours, which means they work on somebody else's house. They work on theirs. They also attend classes.
Yeah.
So our delinquency rate is lower than the national average. Our delinquency rate's about 3%. And we thankfully have an outside agency that helps us, monitors that, because it gets difficult when years prior you're like, oh, this is great, and now you're having to say, which I tell every homeowner, if life happens, you need to stay in touch with us if you fall behind on that mortgage, because there may be assistance or whatever, but don't disappear.
Yeah. And so you started with Habitat. What year was it?
2021.
2021.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you came from the
Action
Ministry
right
at the time.
Right. Which was housing, hunger, and education across North Georgia.
Yeah.
And at one time we had like 50 employees.
Yeah. And when you talk about the continuum of care, which is, I've learned about this over the last several years working with Family Promise.
Sure.
Through Rotary, there's actually like so many different organizations that we work with that are in this continuum of care. Right. Where, folks, and the way our social world is now, folks may find themselves homeless, right? For whatever reason, or in need. And so, one of the first entries is, making sure that they have a place to stay tonight.
Right.
A safe place to stay tonight. And that may be through, one ministry where, okay, here's enough food and, a bed for tonight, in a shelter or something of that nature, to get them to where, especially with kids, right? And do you have a criteria that there are kids involved with Habitat, or that it's family, or
we've taken, as far as the family unit itself.
Yeah.
We take all different type.
Okay, so like single people, or
we've not done any single people since I've been on board. It wouldn't preclude them, but most it's been families.
Yeah, it's mostly families that you're supporting.
A lot of first-time home buyers and first-time living in a house.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have to educate people. The superintendent, the landlord's not going to come and fix the AC.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to clean the air filter yourself.
Yeah.
All this type of stuff that goes with owning a home.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, Michael, I ask every time I do a presentation, how many people had an education class as to how to maintain a home and do all this stuff beforehand. And it's all trial and error. At least it was for me. It was that, I guess, for you as well. Yeah. So we try to educate people. But I grew up in a home.
Yeah.
I mean,
we had parents who were maintaining a home, and we kind of know what has to be happening.
Yeah.
And it was our chores when we were growing up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad, we went from the Tonka trucks to the lawnmower at 12, and you get out there and push it, Steve, and cut the grass.
Yeah. Same thing. It's you're mowing, you're weeding the garden, you're doing all those things that we did. Yes.
Yeah.
And getting up and clean the gutters out and all that.
For sure.
Yeah. But getting back to the continuum of care, I think Habitat is, in this, it's like Habitat's at the end of the process, right?
Yeah, because they're homeowners, they're taxpaying citizens.
Yeah.
I mean, that has been the most beautiful part of my job. When I've sat down and I've heard various stories, seeing people come into the program, but also when you sit down with them, sign those loan papers, and they're a homeowner.
Yeah.
And I've gotten some of them to share with the attorney, like, tell us where you were a couple of years ago. And this woman said, I was homeless a couple of years ago. I heard a gentleman say, my wife passed a couple of years ago, and I'm raising my young daughter, which I already knew that story, but they just share.
Yeah.
I was like, do you ever think you would get here?
Yeah.
And talk about zigs and zags.
Yeah.
They got more zigs and zags than
and when you talk about challenges and learnings, and and some absolutely horrible situations, and that they learn from those, and they are in a different place now because of what they learned.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, and I think when you talk about generational change, the young man, we were at a gala for Habitat, Artemis and I, and some friends a month ago or so.
Right.
Great event. And we sat at the table with a young man.
Trenton?
I mean, who
young
African
American guy got with his mother?
Yeah, got up with his mother.
I saw that he's having a lemonade sale this weekend. It's gotten postponed a couple of times, but he was Cherokee County's Entrepreneur of the Year for his grade or whatever. And he executed a marketing plan.
And that's what so here is somebody who she was homeless.
Yeah.
Right. Had a young son who's now he's
9 or 10.
Yeah. I was going to say 12, but I mean 9, 10 years old. And he told this story about how what changed for him is he has a place that he knows is going to be his home. Right.
Yeah. I went to another event that we had as well. We had somebody speak. And the mom was talking about the child, and the child says, now I can memorize my address, asking. Yeah. Because this child had so many different changes. Why learn your address when next month it's going to change? Yeah. And it's like, wow. It's stuff we take for granted. I was brought home to a house as a child.
Yeah.
And my mom died in that house a couple of years ago. There's been a lot of stability in my life as far as, not moving from town to town or whatever.
It's just absolutely wonderful. And with Trenton, that not long ago they didn't know where the next paycheck was going to come from, and now he is Entrepreneur of the Year for Cherokee County.
His mom's written a book.
Yeah, she's written a fundraiser. That just absolutely changed their lives, and doing good things, and the generational change that's happening. I think it's just absolutely phenomenal. People need to know that that's what Habitat is doing. It's not just making houses available at 0% interest. That's what you do. But the bigger picture of what you do is you change people's lives. You really do.
The trajectory of these kids that come into our program is going to be totally different.
So talking shop here a little bit. You're executive director, and it's just a piece of cake all the time, right? Just like every business.
I saw something about nonprofits the other day that described an executive director, CEO. It's like how many hats you wear. The cheerleader, the strategic planner, the finance.
It's just like a business owner, especially a small business owner.
Right.
You are the chief cook and bottle washer. Right. To a large degree. Or have been, let's say. As we grow, some of where we've been working together is getting you out of some of those things that you need to not be involved in. So tell me a little bit as you're on this path, right? Of growing yourself, of learning, of realizing, you don't have to wear all those hats. And you can start to have other people do it. Tell me what that's doing for you, and what is that doing for the organization?
It's slow turn. Everything doesn't happen over time. But putting some more leaning on other people. We've had some turnover, which, we talk about change and zigging and zagging. But, let's bring in some other people, professionals who also can give us some expertise. On that. So it's been really good.
Well, and the turnover, although we don't necessarily like turnover, who is it? I think Marshall Goldsmith, a coach out there, says the people who got you here will get you there, right? And even some of that turnover, good-hearted people, but we're not the people who can take you to the next level.
When I was hired, the then board chair and some other people that interviewed me is like, we got to get away from this. This is the way we've always done things. Now, let me say, at the time I walked in to the organization, most people, our youngest person was 50-something years old. So I've hired some younger people as well, because we can't keep doing things the way, and prices on building homes have gone up considerably. The need is greater than it's ever been. And we have an opportunity, and we've got to rethink the way we're doing things, and we got to get systems in place to be more efficient. And you've helped me with that. It's like, you got to line people up. We're working on that. I'm checking in with you on that. You're keeping me at task.
But you're doing great jobs, right? And like you say, it's a slow turn. But it's turning. And it's going in the right direction.
So this is unsolicited, people out there. Michael's great, and if you need to find the money to work with him, really, it's good to have somebody, that bounce ideas off, who sees a vision, helps you get to the vision as well. So again, that was unsolicited.
Yes, yeah.
But if you want to make a big contribution to Habitat, we'll generously accept it.
We'll do what we can.
Right.
Well, and I know Rotary has a build coming up here in a few weeks, so we're going to be working together. So I got to get that on my calendar and get out there
for
and
sure.
be part of that service project.
I'm sorry it's going to be at the hottest time of the year. But
I know. Why? Hopefully it's inside. We're doing painting or something like that. Right?
I think.
I hope. I'm not going to do roofing. I'm not going to do roofing in the middle of July.
Before I started working with a crew, I didn't know how, like, my people, and I had a guy that was part-time. He's moved on, but still comes back. He volunteers every week. So it's great that he's there, knows the skills, and we're not paying him. You know?
Yeah.
He's like, I just hate painting. He just doesn't like it.
Yeah, except when it's 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
Well, but we'll be out there, and we had the opportunity last February. Steve and I jumped into an icy cold pool.
Yes, we did
with the polar bear plunge. To raise money,
and I'm glad that Michael's not wearing his T-shirt that he had on, that I had on too. That he got me, which was a size too small.
Yeah. We looked absolutely hideously awesome.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that. And I mean, you talk about raising money, we need to do a better job on our end of letting people know, and because Rotary's doing a phenomenal job with that.
So okay, all the patting each other on the back side.
All
right. Getting back to what is, if you were to say, you know what, if I knew then what I know now, right?
Yeah.
Because people who watch, the whole concept of this is to learn through people's stories, right? To learn through their experiences, to learn, both the good and the bad. Right.
Yeah.
And so if there was something out, that you could say, this is something that maybe it was painful, maybe it was, maybe it was perceived as a failure, but in actuality, it was something that you needed to learn. What's something that comes to mind that's like, wow, this was good that we did this.
You're talking about sensitive habitat or my career?
Or in the past. Because life is not just one bit, in this journey of life.
Well, yeah. I think in my career, I've learned that you got to take some risk.
Yeah.
You got to be out there trying to do new things, particularly in the nonprofit.
Yeah. But risks are scary.
Yes. Yeah. That comes back to the quote earlier: innovate without change. Yeah. Nobody wants to take the plunge as we did in the polar plunge. I'm tying it all together, Michael. Yeah. But nobody wants to take the plunge because it's risky.
Right.
And I don't know when we did that assessment. I mean, I don't know if that was part of about risk adverse.
Yeah.
But you gotta have a vision. You gotta take some risk.
Yeah.
And then you gotta evaluate.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Years ago, I heard a speaker say, and it's become kind of one of my mottos. Right? We have certain mottos in our life that just it's there. And he said, I would rather risk doing something significant than never try and fail fail.
Right.
Than never make an attempt at all.
Yeah.
Right. I will risk failing in order to hit that dream. And if we don't take the risk, we'll never do it.
Well, I mean, think of all the great discoveries and the great things we've done as a country or whatever. If we never had dreamed of going to the moon, we would never have done it.
Yeah. Elon Musk, SpaceX blew up on the launch pad yesterday. Right. And his response, I don't know if you saw or not. Yeah. His response was, but a scratch.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, back to the old Holy Grail, Monty Python and Holy Grail. Tis a scratch. But it's that willingness to take the risk, to have something blow up, to lose. the risk that you may lose things in
Yeah.
order to gain something even better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That, you know, and we talked about some staff turnover and stuff like that. But when you lose something, you reevaluate. What do you need? What can you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah,
I've not heard that Monty Python in a number of years, but I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, the Black Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come back here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so right now, you guys, you are approaching a big risk in
Yes.
habitat right now,
Right.
right? And you're putting a lot of stuff right out there
Yeah.
where habitat of North Georgia is going to be a very different place in 5-6 years. So tell us about the risk
All right.
that you're doing.
So on average, we had, well, years ago, we did a lot more houses when land was cheaper, when costs were cheaper. Last year, we built 5 houses. And I should mention, we have a home repair ministry as well that does repairs for seniors and for veterans and disabled individuals. But we want to grow this ministry so that we serve over the next 5 years, we say 3 to 5, about 60 families, which means we have to scale up rapidly.
Yeah.
We have been blessed, and we did some hard work.
Yeah.
And we found a piece of property, 40 townhomes
Yeah.
in Cherokee County. Yeah. Another piece of property in Dawsonville, which will be our first entrance into Dawson County, that will allow us to build 12 to 14, hopefully, houses as well.
Yeah.
So significant possibilities.
Yeah.
And some really good stuff. But we're figuring it all out as we go.
Yeah.
Trying to strengthen our staff, our board, bring in people and consult with us.
Yeah.
And
thinking somewhat out of the box.
And we took a risk on fundraising as well.
Yeah.
And to date, we've got raised about 1.4. We need to get 9 million secured. We know just to develop the land at this 41 unit townhome, and that may go down because we're talking about architecture and maybe making some of them bigger or whatever to accommodate various family sizes and abilities. So we know that's going to cost us like 3.2 just to
build those.
To
do the land.
Yes, and we've written grants, and we're hoping that comes in, and we've got some favorable response. Cherokee County's been wonderful to work with. They want us to see us succeed. So
and you guys don't make money off of these houses, or a very small amount, right?
I mean, so we make it over time, and the accounting for that is really confusing at times. So we manage from cash flow because that's the most important.
Yeah.
Because of the zero interest, and it would take a whole podcast to explain that. And anyway, but we get a mortgage paid over 30 years.
Yeah.
So a year and a half or so ago, we as a board decided to sell some mortgages, and we generated cash.
Yeah.
And we got about 3 million from that. And we got 100% of the asking price. And when it all got figured out, we got 93 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
So people ask, well, how can you sell a 0% interest mortgage? And banks, and this comes back to my own experience with the Federal Reserve, they have to adhere to certain things. And one is the Community Reinvestment Act, which says you lend to certain demographics and they want to fill their portfolio, at least have some in the bucket of we're doing this.
Yeah.
So we're a quick fix for banks who may not have had a pleasant rating from their regulators, or banks who see this as important or want to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
So we were able to generate some cash.
Yeah.
There.
Well,
and that's thinking out of the box as well.
It is.
You know,
and that background of being in the banking industry,
Yeah.
to know that this is an option out there.
Yeah.
And I guess my question really was, unlike, if you go and build a home, or you go,
Yeah.
out, the builder is making a certain amount of profit.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I was going is,
Yeah.
you are not
No.
selling these to the homeowners for a profit. Right.
We sell it at the appraised value
Yeah.
of what it is in
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have cost
Right.
less
You
than
have cost,
that,
and
but
yeah.
it's coming back and
Yeah.
with no interest.
Yeah.
You can say it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and any of the money, it's going back into building another
Right.
house for somebody else.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's so it is a truly good organization that's out there. Let's see. So looking to see if there was a question out there from
Sure.
somebody, but all right. So that's any last bits that you have here as we start to wrap things up.
I think what I've learned in working with you, Michael, is, and we're doing this as systems. And I've shared some stuff
Yeah.
with you that I've learned.
Yeah.
I've got two guys that are working with us as consultants, and they understand stuff
Yeah.
that I would never have dreamed of. It's like, hey, let's get together after the
Yeah.
4th of July and just
Yeah.
sit down with stuff, because they're only, AI is changing a lot
Yeah.
and we're getting efficiencies in business with
Yeah.
that. And I'm so fascinated by that. But what you help me realize is systems,
Yeah.
and that's what we're putting into place.
Yeah.
And that's not, that's what I came back earlier and said when I was hired. They said, if you do it the same old way, we
It's
don't
not
want to
gonna
do
work.
that. But
Yeah.
the world and everything's just changing
It
so
is.
fast with technology.
It is, and yeah, systems. Building systems in, making
Yeah.
it so it is a repeatable process, and
Yeah.
it's something that people can do, and doing it more efficiently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I've mentioned to you, this may be a benefit to some of your business
Uh-huh.
owners or people you work with. We'll be launching this thing called RAMP,
Uh-huh.
which helps monitor expenses in real time.
Yeah.
And so you assign people on your team a card, like a credit card, but it has a spending limit on it
Yeah.
per
Yeah.
month or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
So we can control costs, because I felt like a lot of times, even though we had an approval process, money was out the gate,
Yeah.
and it was just leaving too fast. So
Yeah.
we're trying to button that down. Meeting when we are looking and how much time and what
Yeah.
they're looking at in the board package, but it's
Wow.
going to streamline the financial,
Yep. Yeah.
the financials. It's also going to put, where we can do our board meetings will be deep dives
Yeah.
into stuff.
Yeah.
And
And
all,
making
all,
them much
all,
more efficient.
all the, yes. And all the kind of, we need to vote on this and vote on
Yeah.
that. They're going to vote at beforehand. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking at that level as
Yeah.
well. How do we
Yeah.
get that more efficient?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah.
And getting the right information to the right people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I've talked about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Steve, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
And hanging out with me here. And,
Yeah. Sure.
and talking about your dreams and where
Yeah.
Habitat is going. I want to encourage anybody out there, if you're looking for a place to give back, and to help your community, Habitat certainly is well worth the time and energy, both financially and for service projects and that sort of thing. I know a lot of businesses get
Yeah.
involved.
Right. We get a lot of money from sponsorships. And I would say to your business owners, I think we provide the best team building
Yes.
exercise.
Yeah.
When you can see and you're framing a house, and a couple of months later, hopefully you come back to
Yeah.
the dedication and you
Yeah.
see this person in tears, and it's
Yeah.
all there and it's going to be theirs.
Yeah. Well, and oftentimes, even in that building phase, you're going to be working alongside whoever's going to own that
Yeah.
house.
Right. You get to know that homeowner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, they're not out there all the time, but there's
Well, we require them to be out there
a lot.
But
Yeah.
yeah. But
So-
if you come like in the middle of the week, your group, that homeowner may be.
They have to work too.
They have to work. They have to, yeah, because they are going to pay a mortgage.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening in and learning. And and I think people don't realize that I work with nonprofits as well as for-profit businesses, because all of it is about having a world of abundance.
Yeah.
And however we do that. So thank you all for watching. Next week we may be taking a break next week, and then the following week is 4th of July, and I know we're taking a break then. Next week we may do a rebroadcast of one of our shows from the past, as I have to be at another event next Friday. So again, thanks. We will talk to you all soon.